Okay, so next talk is related to the last one. Last one is about scale up, but you don't have any scale up without having public and policy engagements. What's the direction of travel? Do people want it, frankly? And so hopefully we'll get an interesting talk here from Dr. Atenchong Nkobou, hopefully I got that right, and James Riley, both from the Royal Agricultural University, sorry. And they're going to talk exactly about what it says on the screen. So to save time, I'm just going to shut up and let those guys give an interesting talk. So guys, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Can you hear me fine, James? Is that all right? So I go ahead.
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, we are part of a broader project, which is a public funded project funded by the EPSRC. So our package is really focused on public and policy engagement within the broader CARMA project, and I'll talk about the CARMA project next slide, James. So the CARMA project really is about how do we ensure a just transition to environmentally, economically, and socially sustainable food systems through cultivated cellular agriculture. So not really focusing on one specific product within cellular agriculture, like cultivated meat, which is a dominant space currently, but looking more broadly at cellular agriculture. And the mission really is to integrate these mainly and truly interdisciplinary approaches to cellular agriculture in a responsible way. It's a 12 million pounds funded project, and we work with various universities. It has 6 packages, as I said, and we are work package 6, focusing mainly on policy and public engagement with multiple private stakeholders as well. Next slide, James. So yeah, if you look at the slides, you'll see that associated projects also include the Bezos Earth Fund in Imperial College, London. Our advisory boards are also very close to the sector as well. But if you also look at the map on the screen, you would also see that there is a dominance of companies, industry, and research in the global north, which also raises questions when we speak to the public as well. And if we have to respond to that just transition question, is it possible that in deploying the technologies, in deploying the products, are we going to reinforce current or contemporary inequalities within the food system? How can we also help alleviate some of those inequalities within the food system? And this has to do with the question of power and transparency. Next slide, James. In order to respond to that vision and to achieve that vision, we within CARMA have distributed the task across 2 main challenges, and I think this also reflects the literature on cellular agriculture, so the underpinning technologies. And I think during this conference you would speak more about the technologies as well. But more importantly for us and our work package, we are looking at how can we really ethically and sustainably integrate these technologies and products into food value chains in such a way that they are really socially and economically and environmentally equitable. And that is why in work package 6 we are engaging with publics and policy to respond to this specific question. Next slide, James. So the rationale really is not really to nudge the public or to influence in a way, but to go along with the public, to see if we could shape the growth of the technology and policy through public and stakeholder dialogues and deliberation, and enable constructive critique, and embed the hopes and concerns of the publics in the development and deployment of this technology. And so we really adhere to the principles of responsible research and innovation, which is a process that seeks to promote creativity and opportunities for science and innovation that are socially desirable and undertaken in the public interest. So that is our main principle, and we are trying to adhere by those principles of responsible research and innovation. There are four main dimensions that we look at critically. So one, importantly, is inclusion. So we ensure that we have diverse publics and stakeholder. James would elaborate more on the methodology and how we do that. The sector itself is inherently anticipatory. So within the UK, this has not been approved. So we are trying to critically engage with future imaginaries using publics as a means or as a critical friend. And through this, CARMA scientists also engage in intensive reflexivity. So we have what we call deep dives, where scientists bring their assumptions and their concerns during the development of the underpinning technologies to the citizens, and collaboratively or jointly we engage in a critical discourse about some of these underlying assumptions that the scientists have, and the scientists go back and reflect on these concerns and assumptions, and that helps shape the development of the technology. And so in a way that becomes a responsive process within CARMA's development and deployment of cellular products. Next slide, James. So what this means is that we do not see publics simply as consumers. We move beyond the conception of publics as consumers who are only concerned with whether or not to buy a product, but we see publics as people who have agency, who have values, beliefs, and knowledges that could help shape the way these technologies are integrated within the broader food system. So we also rely on a food system thinking approach on the way we think and analyze and interpret the conversations that we have with both scientists, citizens, policymakers, and stakeholders during our processes and our research. Next slide, James. And I think this is strategically important because I think for the sector to develop, it needs to move away from a deficit model of perceptions of the public as passive recipients of knowledge, as people who lack the ability and the agency to construct knowledge in themselves. We also need to move away from a view that these technologies that we are trying to develop are politically neutral. They have the potential to shape society, and they are shaping society as we speak. So we must almost be sensitive to the political nature of the development of these technologies. And I think ultimately the success of the technology will depend on attending to social, cultural, and political environment within which these technologies are developed and deployed rather than ignoring them. Next slide, Jim. I think it's over to you to continue.
Thanks, Atenchong. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about our process of how we've gone about these engagements, and then some preliminary results from our report that should be coming out hopefully over the next month. So we've got two main forums, the Citizens Forum and the Stakeholder Forum. Citizens are made up largely, are made up of the general public, as much as that's a thing. I'll talk about the recruitment on the next slide. And the stakeholders are people who have got some sort of active interest either in the technology or its potential effects in society. So the Stakeholder Forum is a growing group throughout the multiple years of the project, and our Citizens Forum, we've set it up in a way where we have yearly chapters. So we have around 20 citizens in each yearly chapter. They come in, go through the program, discuss, deliberate, feedback, and at the end of the year, they've developed a certain amount of expertise that they're kind of less representative of the public. So then in the subsequent year, we begin a new chapter with new citizens. But at the end of each Citizens Forum chapter, we invite, if they wish to, invite the citizens if they wish to join the stakeholder forum as citizens experts who have developed an interest and a certain amount of expertise in this area as well. So I'm going to talk. We kind of designed the citizens forums. I'm going to talk about the results of that today to be democratic, as Atenchong said. They're iterative. They go through multiple stages, and each year, each citizens forum meets 4 times: 1 in person over a 2-day weekend, and 3 subsequent quarterly online meetings for around 3 hours. So, the recruitment we did for the Citizens Forum was through a market research agency. We purposefully sampled to be indicative of the UK population, and that was 20 people. It can't be fully representative, but we have tried to represent major demographic and socio-economic groups. Where groups make up less than 5% of the population that we deem to be important, we try to overrepresent them. So, for example, people from Northern Ireland or people who are vegan. Obviously, there's only a certain amount of that we can do each year. So as subsequent years come in, such as this year, we select new important groups to be able to be part of the Citizen Forum. And this year it's kind of been immunocompromised conditions, people who have halal preferences, and food allergies as well. That's not everyone in the forum, but it's a few individuals who are part of the mix. So over the course of multiple years, we're kind of getting a good amount of representation. The program, so this is last year's program, which was chapter 1. You see on the right, we had a number of experts from industry, from NGOs, from trade organizations coming in to talk to kind of impart knowledge to the citizens, but also engage in this critical discussion with them around the technology. They kind of set a bit of a technical baseline in which conversations can take place. So citizens, many of whom haven't heard of this area before, feel comfortable in discussing it. But they're not there to influence. As I say, they're very much there to share their expertise, be conversation partners with the citizens. Over the quarterly meetings of last year, I think there's 2 key parts to our forums. As Atenchong said, the deep dives, where a CARMA scientist themselves, who could be in engineering and biology, comes to the citizens with a present research challenge that they would like to discuss and feed back on. So last year we discussed what amino acid sources should CARMA use for growth media, what cell sources should CARMA use, and how should CARMA measure environmental impacts. We also had deep dives through a partnership with the FSA's regulatory sandbox on cell-cultivated products. So we had, at the end of the previous Citizens Forum, we had a deep dive on labeling to feedback citizens' views into, again, that regulatory process and policy process. We also had broader conversations with our citizens, particularly around the conditions of acceptability, as we called it, or the forum's recommendations. And these are the kind of checks and balances that the citizens perceive to be needed for, in this case, we were focusing specifically on cultivated meat, for it to be contributing to a fairer food system. So for the rest of the talk, I will largely go through what those recommendations are. I say these are coming from an upcoming report. So public health really was one of the main concerns around cultivated meat itself, but this went beyond immediate safety, and it included kind of perceptions based on previous food crises, food controversies. So things came up like long-term health impacts coming to light when it's too late. Could this contribute to worsening health trends associated with meat consumption and ultra-processed foods? Concerns around batch contamination and imported foods from areas with less stringent regulation, and that there might be certain groups in the population that respond differently. I'm not going to read any. I've got a few quotes on the screen from the citizens forums. I won't read them, but I'll leave them there for you to read if you wish. I said these will all be in the report that's coming out soon. But those conditions of acceptability for our citizens around public health were as follows. So to protect public health, UK regulation should include 2-year trials to measure direct health impacts, mandatory ongoing long-term independent product testing, strict rules on importing cultivated meat, even for products that contain traces, and also production licenses that are only granted for a limited time frame, say 10 years. Now, not all our conversations in the Citizens Forum tended towards consensus or was a forced consensus, but around these recommendations, these conditions of acceptability, this was a consensus exercise. So all of the group of 18 who were part of the forum last year came to these consensus positions that they see as the conditions on which cultivated meat could be trusted and could be implemented fairly. There were also concerns around power and transparency, particularly that companies could have too much control over the food system. Again, that's kind of echoing some of the resistance to GMOs back in the day. And also a worry that that cultivated meat could be replacing traditional meat production, so that the system becomes overly reliant on cultivated meat. There was concerns around income currently going to smaller producers and into local economies will consolidate it again into the centralizing of power amongst multinationals. There were concerns around the industry not being transparent or potentially not being transparent. Say all these things are forward looking. They're looking at potential futures. They're anticipating coming up with ways which we could avert the worst of all worlds. And there was also concerns that the government won't be transparent about their interests in cultivated meat. So to build trust in the food system, citizens suggested that UK regulators should create a non-commercial governing body to oversee the industry, which provides balanced governance, collaborates internationally and steers investment to low-income countries, champions open access and antitrust, spots and flags loopholes, benchmarks standards, regulatory standards, and sets industry norms and standards on transparency. The second big recommendation was to ensure that no single company can own more than one part of the supply chain or own a patent for more than 2 years, again, as a potential way to resist monopolies and the centralizing of power. So a third concern was around equality and affordability. And again, this is one of the big unanswered questions, is whether this is going to be a premium product or a cheap product that replaces processed meats. And there were concerns around that there could be a 2-tier food system where some groups only can afford cultivated meat, that cultivated meat might potentially displace healthier sources of protein, such as vegan and vegetarian sources. It will potentially result in job losses in farming and impact rural economies and ways of life. And that there is a potential, as Atenchong alluded to, that it could deepen inequalities between the global north and south. So to ensure cultivated meat contributes to a fair food system, the citizens thought that UK policy should resource a sustained analysis of how cultivated meat could impact food equality and also support farmers through compensatory schemes. I know we're coming up to time now, so I'll just finish quickly the last couple of slides. It wasn't, I mean, not that this was doom and gloom, but again, the citizens were coming up with ways in which they thought we could ensure a fairer future with cultivated meat in it. But they also had hopes. They hoped cultivated meat would reduce animal suffering, reduce the environmental impacts of our diets, and increase the resilience and security of our food system. But on the reduction of animal suffering, that had to be done in a way, not just because cultivated meat exists, it necessarily means there will be a reduction, but the way in which cultivated meat gets produced should be done in a way which also reduces animal suffering. So, final slide then. Just to finish off with a few quotes from the citizens on their hopes. One of the citizens said, "Please continue developing cultured meat and cellular agriculture. Despite some doubts, it can be a useful addition to the food world and can help food security if produced following strict guidelines." And the second citizen said, the most important thing for me would be the environmental issues and hopefully the environmental benefits in the medium term. That would be the most significant thing for me. And yes, I don't like animal cruelty. So you can find out more about CARMA projects through the QR code on the CARMA website and contact me in Atenchong or the RAU side of the projects that the citizens and stakeholder forums are through those emails. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Right on the money there, time-wise. That's always much appreciated. The citizens route, we were actually using that just the other day for the Scottish Food Alliance, and it gives you an interesting approach. Looking at some of the things that came up from the power piece in that, I would be interested if you ran the same thing again, but as if you were introducing livestock to the food chain and see what kind of answers you got. So things talking about monopoly in certain areas, where does the power sit? If you ran the livestock one, because I could see some of the issues they're concerned of about cellular meat is already happening in other aspects of our supply chain anyway. So are we worrying about things effectively that we'll never be able to control there because they're market dominated? I mean, I'm just being devil's advocate here, to be honest.
I think that was a concern, whether this would just maintain the status quo or reinforce the status quo or bring something different. And if it's not bringing any change in terms of the power dynamics within the current food system, then what change is it really making from that perspective? So because it is anticipatory and because it is developing, is it possible for us to mitigate those power imbalances within the food system if we can do so, rather than just resigning to the power imbalance itself?
Rather than accepting the errors of the past as just process, just repeat anyway. No, I can understand that. I suppose going back to that then is your sample size, or actually it doesn't matter what sample size it is. How do you ensure impact rather than just becoming an area where the loudest voices can shout and people are not just barking at the moon?
So we've got a few mechanisms really. Say last year's Citizens Forum was separated into these two parts: developing these conditions of acceptability, but also the deep dives. CARMA is extremely lucky in that it is such a broad project across all these institutions. Say the RAU is just one part, but we have access to the scientists. The scientists themselves are engaged. Scientists and engineers on the CARMA project are engaged with the Citizens Forum. So when they can present quite technical questions that they're currently contending with in their research to the citizens, not for technical advice, obviously that's not what this is for, but it's because when you kind of talk to people outside of your silos who are bringing different values, beliefs, hopes, aspirations, and different histories to a question, you tend to get answers that you hadn't thought of before. And some of that is anticipating kind of future downstream effects that you might have not anticipated without them. So luckily we have access to the CARMA scientists who are saying, not necessarily what should we just call this process, but what should we do with this process? What are the potential downstream effects, so that they can change their research direction? That's a real direct impact. Also, through our partnership with the FSA's regulatory sandbox, we've also started to run deep dives with the citizens around labeling, around allergens, around a whole host of questions that the FSA is currently contending with in a policy setting. So that is a real direct line to impact as well. So on the deep dives, which are more, procedural and constrained in a way, because they need to be, because there are specific questions that need broader answers feeding into, but will lead to a specific outcome, that's quite easy to chart the impact. In terms of these conditions of acceptability, which are kind of, in an ideal world, this will build trust. As you said, there are massive market forces, there are massive geopolitical constraints on how the world is, and we're not saying that our citizens' conditions of acceptability will be implemented. But what we are saying is that without attending to these social concerns, technologies may well be socially viable, but they might not have a social license or be socially viable as well. And that's really important when we're looking at new technologies and how they integrate into society.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, again, we've got about a minute left, so a quick answer would be useful. How do you scale this up? So, if you got many more involved, arguably your statistic relevance of the comments back and applying statistics to people's comments is a very difficult thing to understand. Or do you expand this? Have you potentially got something you would expand as an EU project here? So you can.
What we are doing is progressively we expand the sample size. So each year we refresh the citizens forum, and so over the 6 years we hope to have, say, an average of 120 citizens.
Because kind of thinking, but it's still going to be UK. Do we want to pull in Europe?
Oh, yeah. There's a bid going on to expand it to Japan, Mexico, and Ethiopia as well at the moment.
Cool.
So if that is successful, then we'll see how that can become widely deployed.
Well, certainly from a NAPIC perspective, we'd be very keen to buddy up in aspects of this for stuff we're doing as well, because we're kind of more than just cell culture. We've got other things. So, okay, I think that
be in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's us just slightly over. So I suspect most of the companies, and certainly production companies, will be wanting to chat because, to be brutally honest, from a marketing perspective, they'll want to see the outcomes of this for views and opinions, which is fine, I think. So if you want to contact James and Atenchong, the emails are there. You can contact them from the network bit at the back. Please do so. That's why they're here. They want to reach out and work with different people and get their outputs known. So thanks, guys. Great presentation.
Yeah,
thank you.